The sun had barely risen when the rhythmic clang of metal filled the old steel factory. The air was thick with the smell of oil, sweat, and molten iron. Amid the noise and chaos, a young mechanic named Arun worked tirelessly, his faded blue uniform stained from years of hard labor. His hands were rough, his nails blackened, yet there was a quiet pride in the way he handled every machine, as if each bolt and gear mattered. Arun had been working at the factory for 6 years. Every month he counted down the days until payday, not because he dreamed of luxuries, but because his small salary was all that kept his modest life afloat. He lived alone in a tiny rented room with peeling walls, a rusted fan, and an old photograph of his parents on the shelf. Every rupee mattered. That Friday afternoon, as the whistle signaled the end of the shift, the workers lined up to collect their pay. The line was long, filled with chatter about bills, food, and family plans. When Arun's turn came, he bowed respectfully to the factory manager and took the small brown envelope that contained his entire month's earnings. Just enough for rent, food, and maybe a small repair on his broken bicycle. He stepped outside, wiping the sweat from his brow when he heard muffled sobs near the back of the workshop. Curious, he followed the sound and found Rahul, one of the younger workers, sitting on the floor, face buried in his hands. "What happened, Rahul?" Arun asked gently. Rahul lifted his head, his eyes red. "My wife, and she gave birth early. The baby is in the hospital. The doctor says we need medicine tonight, or..." His voice broke. "I don't have the money, Arun, not even half." Arun didn't hesitate. He looked down at the envelope in his hand, then at Rahul. Without a word, he pressed the money into the young man's palm. "Take it," he said quietly. "Go, save your child." Rahul's eyes widened. "But this is your whole salary. What will you do?" Arun smiled faintly. "I'll manage. Maybe not with money, but with peace of heart." As Rahul ran off into the night, Arun turned toward the dim factory lights. He didn't know that Mr. Khanna, the factory owner, had been standing on the balcony above, watching every moment silently, his eyes filled with something between surprise and admiration. That night, a poor mechanic's kindness had lit a spark that fate would soon fan into something extraordinary. The following morning, the factory floor buzzed with energy. Sparks flew as welding torches hissed and the roar of machinery drowned out most conversation. Yet among the workers, whispers spread like wildfire. Everyone had heard about what Arun had done, how he had given his entire month's salary to save Rahul's newborn child. Some called him noble. Others called him foolish. "You can't feed yourself on kindness," one worker muttered, shaking his head. "He'll learn when the landlord comes knocking." But Arun paid no attention to the gossip. He simply tightened a bolt on an engine, wiped the grease from his hands, and went on with his work as if nothing had changed. Later that day, a sharp voice echoed across the floor. "Arun, Mr. Khanna wants to see you in his office." The message sent a chill down his spine. The factory owner never summoned mechanics unless it was serious. Arun washed his hands quickly, straightened his worn-out uniform, and made his way up the creaky metal stairs toward the glass-walled office overlooking the workshop. Inside, Mr. Khanna sat behind a heavy mahogany desk, a pair of gold-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. He looked up as Arun entered, gesturing for him to sit. "I've heard about your generosity," Khanna said, his voice calm but unreadable. "You gave away your salary, didn't you?" "Yes, sir," Arun replied softly. "Rahul needed it more than I did." Khanna leaned back, studying him. "And what about your rent? Your food, how will you manage?" Arun hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Somehow I always do. Money is important, sir, but not more than life." For a long moment the old man said nothing. His sharp eyes lingered on Arun's tired but sincere face. Then, without warning, Khanna slid a paper across the desk, a layoff notice. "We're reducing staff due to cost cuts," he said curtly. "I'm sorry, but your position has been terminated." The words hit like a hammer. Arun's chest tightened, but he didn't argue or plead. He simply stood, nodded respectfully, and said, "Thank you for the opportunity, sir." As he walked out, Khanna watched him through the glass, his expression unreadable. When the door closed, the factory owner whispered to himself, "Let's see if his kindness still stands when he has nothing left." The true test had just begun. The days that followed felt endless. Without his job at the factory, Arun's world began to unravel piece by piece. His small savings disappeared within 2 weeks, spent on rent, rice, and a few cups of tea to keep him warm during sleepless nights. The landlord started knocking on his door more often, demanding payment. When Arun couldn't pay, he quietly moved out, carrying his few belongings in a torn cloth bag and his toolbox in one hand. He began spending his days on the roadside, repairing old bicycles and rusty scooters for a few coins. It wasn't much, but it kept him fed. The city was merciless. Buses roared past him, dust filled his lungs, and sometimes people didn't even look him in the eye. Yet even in his struggle, Arun never lost his compassion. When a street boy came by, hungry and barefoot, Arun split his bread in half and gave it away. When an old woman's cartwheel broke, he repaired it without charging a rupee. He believed kindness was his only wealth, something no one could take away. But deep down, he was tired. The rain that night felt colder than ever. The streets were nearly empty, and the dim streetlights flickered as he sat near a small tea stall, his clothes soaked and his body shivering. Steam rose from his cup as he stared at the reflections of passing headlights in the puddles. He wondered if his parents were watching from above, if they were proud, or if he had been foolish to believe that doing good would ever change his fate. Then, suddenly a sleek black car slowed down and stopped beside him. The tinted window rolled down, and a familiar face appeared, Mr. Khanna, the factory owner. "Arun?" Khanna's voice was deep but gentle. "Get in." Arun hesitated. His first instinct was to refuse. He was embarrassed, drenched, dirty, and defeated, but something in Khanna's eyes made him obey. Inside the car, warmth surrounded him. Khanna studied the weary mechanic for a long moment before speaking. "I've been watching you, Arun," he said quietly. "Even when life turned its back on you, you still gave to others. You've passed a test that few men ever could." Arun blinked in disbelief. "A test?" Khanna smiled faintly. "Yes, and tomorrow I want to show you something that might just change your life forever." The next morning, a thin mist hung over the city as Arun stood outside the same black car that had changed the course of his night. His clothes were freshly washed, borrowed from a neighbor, and though his heart raced, his mind was calm. He had no idea what awaited him. Mr. Khanna arrived on time, as precise as ever. "Come with me," he said simply, and the two drove through narrow streets that soon opened into a quieter, greener part of the city. Arun watched in confusion as the car stopped in front of a newly painted building. The gate bore a shiny signboard that read, "Arun Auto Works, managed by A. Kumar." For a moment he thought his eyes were playing tricks. "Sir, that's my name," he whispered. Khanna smiled, stepping out of the car. "It is. This workshop is yours, Arun. I built it for you." Arun's knees felt weak. "Mine, but why?" Khanna placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Because the world needs men like you. When I saw you give away your salary on not for fame, not for praise, I saw something rare. You reminded me of my younger self before success hardened my heart. So I decided to test you, to see if your kindness was real or just a moment of emotion. You passed, Arun. You passed with honor." Tears filled Arun's eyes as he stepped inside the workshop. It was spotless, filled with shining tools, new machines, and the faint smell of fresh paint. Everything was perfect, far beyond anything he'd ever dreamed of. Khanna continued, "You'll manage this place, hire people who need work, and fix not just machines, but lives. I'll support you until you can stand on your own. Consider this your new beginning." Overwhelmed, Arun clasped Khanna's hands. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," Khanna said with a warm smile. "Just keep giving, the way you always have." Months later, Arun Auto Works became a symbol of hope in the community. He hired struggling workers, paid them fairly, and always kept a jar labeled "For those in need" near the counter. The poor mechanic who once gave away his salary had now built an empire of compassion. Proof that true wealth doesn't come from money, but from the goodness we give to the world.